So, think about when you stand in front of a mirror, right? Like just in
Yeah.
your bathroom.
Okay, yeah. Just a regular mirror.
Right. There is this basic kind of unspoken contract between you and the glass. It's just, a closed loop of physics.
Hmm.
The light hits your face, it bounces off the silver backing, and then it shoots right back into your retina.
Exactly. It's just a one-to-one relationship.
Yeah, you see what is literally there. So maybe there's a smudge on your cheek or, I don't know, a stray hair.
Or just the tired look in your eyes from a
Right.
super long week.
Right. Exactly. It is entirely manageable.
And crucially, the mirror doesn't actually possess an opinion about you.
Right.
Like, it doesn't judge the smudge on your cheek. It just passively reports the physics of that exact moment. It's an objective surface.
Right. But then imagine you step out of that bathroom and into the realm of just massive, unprecedented global fame.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I don't mean just being well known, I mean the kind of fame that fundamentally reshapes the entire architecture of human culture.
The absolute peak of visibility.
Exactly. When a human being hits that specific stratospheric frequency, that simple objective pane of glass, just it shatters.
Right.
We stop looking at a person and we basically start looking at a void.
Because the figure becomes this massive looming mirror themselves.
Yes. A mirror that doesn't just show our individual faces, but like reflects our entire society back at us.
Oh, that's heavy.
It really is.
Re-
It reflects our collective psychology, our unexamined biases, our deepest fears, our hidden prejudices, all of it.
So they basically become a psychological funhouse mirror.
Exactly.
The actual breathing person behind the glass completely disappears under the crushing weight of a billion different people are projecting onto them all at the exact same time.
Yeah, and that is exactly why we are doing this deep dive today. We are getting into something incredibly potent
I'm really excited for this one.
because we have this source text that totally upended how I think about fame and legacy and, well, just the mechanics of human perception.
It's a really unique lens.
It is. It's a profound Portuguese essay, and it's titled Atravessar o Véu. The English translation is Crossing the Veil, The Legacy of the Untouchable.
Right.
And it's written by an author named Elder.
And, to really grasp the gravity of what Elder is doing here, we have to look at his background.
Right. Who is this guy?
Well, he is not a tabloid journalist. He isn't some biographer trying to, sell a scandalous tell-all book.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. He is actually a photographer, a musician, and a self-described observer beyond the veil.
An observer beyond the veil. I love that.
Right. He's explicitly hunting for the human essence. He's looking for the underlying wisdom that simply refuses to fit into the neat, prepackaged narratives that the media ecosystem spoon feeds us every single day.
Yeah, he literally writes in the text, let me find it. He says, I do not write to convince anyone. I write to shift the gaze.
Which is exactly our mission on this deep dive today.
Exactly. But before we get deep into the weeds on the mechanics of this global mirror, we really need to draw a very hard line in the sand.
Definitely. We need to be clear about what this exploration is and what it definitely is not.
Right. So this is a vital parameter for everyone listening.
This exploration is not a biographical recap of a timeline. We are not doing that.
Right. No dates and facts.
No. And it is not a music review ranking albums. And, most importantly, it is entirely separated from the controversies surrounding the subject of Elder's essay, Michael Jackson.
Yes. Very important to state.
Following the author's incredibly strict premise, we are not here to act as a jury. We aren't taking sides, we aren't litigating the past, and we are absolutely not endorsing any specific viewpoints on the highly charged, polarized events of his life.
Right. We are maintaining a completely neutral stance on the controversies.
Exactly. Our entire focus today is on examining the source's central philosophical thesis.
Which is basically asking, what mechanically and psychologically happens when a human being crosses the boundary of the ordinary, mutates into a global vibration, and is literally forced to become a mirror for the entire human race.
It's a radical shift in perspective.
It really is.
Right.
But to understand the mirror, to understand how the glass got so massive that it could reflect the whole world, we can't start at the peak.
No, we have to go back to the sand.
Right. We have to look at the raw material before it was melted down and, polished by the industry.
The origin story.
Exactly. The essay starts with the origin story, but definitely not the fairy tale version. It starts with a child caught inside a machine.
Yeah, the author introduces a phrase early on that just completely strips away the romantic mythology we usually attach to child prodigies.
What does he call it?
He calls the beginning of this life a trained destiny.
Wow. A trained destiny. That phrase feels so heavy.
It does.
Because when I think of musical genius, I tend to default to this really romantic image.
Yeah.
You know, it's just sitting at a dusty piano, just plucking out melodies because their soul just can't contain the music.
Right, like it's totally organic, like a bird singing on a branch.
Exactly.
Mm.
But Elder is aggressively pushing back on that idea.
Yeah.
He argues that before the stage and before all the gold records, there was a child born into a structure where his immense talent was not actually a choice.
No, not at all.
The Jackson Five wasn't just a musical group of brothers casually jamming in a garage. Elder describes it as an emotional and musical precision factory.
A factory. Let's really look at the mechanics of that word. A factory is not designed for organic growth. Right. It is designed for maximum yield and zero variance. It requires raw materials, a relentless conveyor belt, and ruthless quality control.
Okay, so map that onto the group.
In this context, the raw material was a child's raw talent and sheer physical energy.
Mm-hmm.
The conveyor belt was the relentless schedule, the rehearsals, the performances, the studio sessions, and the quality control. That was built entirely on unyielding discipline and immense pressure.
Right. I'm trying to map this onto something we understand today so you can really picture it.
Okay, what are you thinking?
Think of an elite state-sponsored Olympic gymnastics training facility.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right. Or maybe a highly monetized algorithmic content house where kids are just churning out videos all day.
Yeah, those are perfect modern examples.
You have these hyper-controlled environments that are engineered for absolute perfection. But the glaring difference is that in those modern equivalents, there's usually an adult who signed a contract. Right.
Or at least an understanding that there's an outside world you can eventually return to.
Exactly. But in this precision factory Elder is talking about, it was built around a child who never gets to clock out.
Never. The machine is just always running.
Always. And his very existence is the fuel for it. Elder makes this really haunting assertion that within this relentless turning machine, a little boy was trapped. And he says this boy never totally left.
Yeah, and from a psychological standpoint, that concept of the boy who never left is deeply, deeply concerning.
Break that down for us. Why is it so concerning?
Well, if we look at developmental psychology figures like Piaget or Erickson, we know that a healthy human identity requires unstructured space.
Like just time to be a kid?
Exactly. A child needs the freedom to play, the freedom to make mistakes without catastrophic consequences, and a private, unobserved space to discover who they are outside of what they can produce.
Right. But in a precision factory.
In a precision factory, there is no private space. A mistake isn't just a cute learning opportunity. It's a defect on the assembly line that literally stops production.
Wow.
The child's output is immediately commodified.
So the boundary between, who I am and what I produce is just completely erased before it can even form.
Precisely. And Elder points to this as an interrupted childhood.
He's interrupted childhood.
Yes, but we really shouldn't read that as just a nostalgic sadness for a kid who didn't get to go to the park enough.
Right? It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It is a structural, foundational fracture of the psyche. It's a violent splitting.
A splitting of what?
You have the private human being who has basic, fragile emotional needs, and they are violently severed from the public entity they are forced to become just to keep the factory running and the family fed.
Oh, man. It really makes me think about our complicity in all of this.
How do you mean?
Like, as consumers of culture, we are so incredibly demanding. We want the flawless vocal, the perfectly synchronized routine, the pristine album.
We want the shiny, finished product, shrink-wrapped and delivered to our ears.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But we completely look away from the factory floor. We actively choose to ignore the human machinery, the psychological toll, and just the sheer friction required to produce that level of output.
Well, yeah, because looking at the factory floor ruins the magic of the product.
Right. Nobody wants to see how the sausage is made.
Exactly. When you realize the human being is carrying the weight of a massive economic institution before they've even learned how to regulate their own nervous system, well, the music hits differently.
Yeah.
The foundation is inherently unstable.
Okay, so we have this highly trained, emotionally fractured, incredibly powerful component inside the factory.
Right.
But a factory is designed to maintain the status quo. So what happens when the most vital cog in the machine realizes it has outgrown the machine itself?
That is the big question.
Right. How does a component that was literally engineered to follow the rhythm suddenly decide to dictate the rhythm for the entire world?
Well, I can tell you it doesn't happen quietly.
No.
Not at all. According to Elder's text, The transition from the highly controlled environment of the group to a solo career wasn't merely an artistic evolution. He calls it a cultural implosion.
Okay, see, I tripped over that word when I read it. Implosion.
Yeah.
Yeah, because why not explosion? An explosion seems more fitting for someone bursting onto the solo scene.
It's a very deliberate physics metaphor by the author.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it. An explosion pushes energy outward, right? It disperses.
Okay, yeah.
But an implosion happens when the external pressure on a structure is so great, or the internal gravity becomes so dense that the existing structure collapses inward upon itself.
Oh, wow. So the industry collapsed.
Exactly. Elder's arguing that the sheer, concentrated gravity of his solo artistry collapsed the old rules of the music industry. The structure couldn't hold him, so it caved in.
And what he built in the aftermath of that implosion is staggering.
Completely unprecedented.
The essay claims he didn't just enter the music industry, he actually redesigned the body of music.
Yes.
Elder says dance transitioned from being mere movement into an actual articulate language, and sound evolved from being just background entertainment into a collective phenomenon.
It's a huge shift.
Let's get into the mechanics of that, though. How does dance actually become a language? Because to me, dance is just, dancing.
Right. Well, before this shift, if we look at the broader context of popular music, dance was largely just an accessory.
Okay.
A singer stood at a microphone, and perhaps there was a synchronized routine behind them, or they swayed to the beat. The dance was the accompaniment to the vocal text.
So the voice was the main event.
Exactly. What Jackson did was subvert that entire hierarchy. He made the physical geometry of his body the primary text.
Oh, I see. So the movements actually had syntax.
Yes. Biomechanically, he used isolations.
What's that?
It's moving one part of the body while the rest is completely frozen. And he mixed that robotic precision with sudden, impossible fluidity. He wasn't just moving to the beat, he was creating visual percussion.
Visual percussion, that's a great way to put it.
Think about it like punctuation.
Ah.
A stop, a freeze, a sudden snap of the wrist. These functioned like commas, exclamation points, and question marks.
Wow.
He forced the global audience to listen with their eyes.
Listen with their eyes.
Right. When you can communicate grief, defiance, or joy purely to the kinetic tension in your shoulders, you have invented a new vocabulary. You've bypassed the need for a shared spoken language.
Which brings us to, honestly, the most audacious claim in this section of the essay.
Oh, yeah.
Elder writes, he didn't ask the industry for permission, he displaced the industry.
It's a very powerful framing.
I love this framing so much. It really reminds me of the tech world.
How so?
Okay, imagine an entrenched software monopoly. Like a massive company that has controlled the operating system of every computer for decades.
Okay, I'm with you.
Then someone comes along and writes a new piece of code. But it isn't just an app designed to run on the old operating system.
No.
No, it completely rewrites the foundational code, rendering the old system totally obsolete.
Right. It makes the old way irrelevant.
Exactly. You don't politely ask the old gatekeepers for a seat at the boardroom table. You throw out the table, burn down the boardroom, and force everyone to move into your new house.
And that is a terrifying prospect for the establishment.
I bet it is.
Because if we connect this displacement to the broader reality of how power works, the industry is not just a neutral, benevolent platform for distributing art.
What is it, Bern?
The music industry, the media industry, these are massive, entrenched structures of power, capital, and control. They act as the absolute gatekeepers.
They decide who wins.
Exactly. They dictate who gets seen, who is allowed to be a superstar, and what specific cultural narratives are permitted to flourish.
And historically, they've been very, very protective of who gets to hold that kind of universal cross-demographic power.
Absolutely. So when an individual completely bypasses those gatekeepers, when an artist creates a direct, unmediated, visceral language with the global public that completely transcends race, geography, and class, they are disrupting a highly lucrative status quo.
Right.
They are proving that the machinery of the industry is actually secondary to the power of the artist.
But, the house always wins, right? Or at least it fights tooth and nail to make sure it doesn't lose.
Always.
Elder explicitly notes that displacing that kind of entrenched power always exacts a price. You don't just rewrite the rules of a multi-billion-dollar monopoly and walk away into the sunset.
No, the system invariably retaliates.
Right.
The industry and the societal power structures surrounding it will extract a heavy, often devastating toll from anyone who proves they are bigger than the machinery itself.
And his disruption was massive.
The cultural disruption was so massive, so undeniable, that it propelled him to the absolute summit of human recognition.
Yeah.
It created a level of fame that is almost mathematically impossible to replicate in today's fragmented media landscape.
Right, everybody knew him. But reaching that absolute peak is where the story takes a massive philosophical turn in the essay.
It really does.
Because the cruel, terrifying irony that Elder points out is that the moment you achieve absolute, universal human recognition, well, that is the exact moment your actual humanity disappears.
This is the threshold where the human being dissolves into what Elder calls the global mirror.
The global mirror.
Yes. Elder posits that at the absolute zenith of his fame, he ceased to be an artist. He became a symbol. And symbols, the author writes, do not belong to themselves.
I really want to dig into this mechanism of becoming a symbol.
Okay, let's unpack it.
Because I look at it like turning into a human green screen.
A green screen. Okay, I like where this is going.
Yeah, so if you go on a big Hollywood movie set, before all the digital effects are added in post-production, you just have an actor standing in front of a massive, aggressively blank green canvas.
Right.
Now, the green screen itself possesses no image. It has no narrative. But later, the director can project literally anything onto
A
it.
burning city, a spaceship.
Exactly. A burning apocalyptic city, a serene alien landscape, a terrifying monster, anything. So when a person reaches this specific critical mass of fame, society stops seeing the human being entirely. The person becomes the green screen, and we, the public, are the directors projecting our own movies onto them.
It's a brilliant analogy, honestly, because Elder details exactly what kinds of movies the world was projecting onto this specific green screen.
What were they projecting?
The text says the world projected genius, purity, weirdness, controversy, suspicion, perfection, and ruin,
Wow.
all simultaneously.
How does a human mind survive being the screen for that many contradictory movies at once? I mean, how is that even possible?
It doesn't, at least not without profound fracturing.
Right.
And this brings us to what I believe is the absolute most crucial philosophical thesis of the entire essay.
Let's hear it.
Elder writes, when someone becomes a global mirror, they cease to be seen. They pass into being interpreted. And interpretation is not truth, it is projection.
Interpretation is not truth. It is projection.
Yes.
That is such a disruptive idea. It completely invalidates how we consume media today.
It really does.
Like, we think when we interpret a celebrity's actions or a politician's tweet, we are doing detective work to find the truth. But Elder says, no, you're just projecting.
Because in psychology, projection is a primal defense mechanism.
Okay, explain that for me.
Carl Jung spoke extensively about the concept of the shadow.
The shadow, right.
We all have qualities, desires, insecurities, and impulses that we simply cannot accept within ourselves. We have brilliant potential we are afraid to realize, and we have dark, chaotic fears we just absolutely refuse to acknowledge.
Okay, so we hide them.
We hide them, yes, but instead of dealing with them internally, we eject them outward. We attribute them to someone else.
So when a figure becomes ubiquitous, like when they are in every home, on every radio, on every screen, they just become the ultimate, most convenient vessel for our collective unconscious.
Exactly. Society uses these massive cultural figures to outsource its own psychological baggage.
Give me an example of how that works.
Well, if an entire culture is secretly grappling with a deep sense of lost innocence and a desire for perpetual childhood, it projects absolute angelic purity onto the icon.
Okay, I see that.
But conversely, if a society is deeply paranoid, cynical, and obsessed with hidden corruption, it projects that dark, suspicious narrative onto the exact same icon.
Wow.
The icon's actual, lived, breathing reality is completely erased in the crossfire. They're no longer a person who eats breakfast and has bad days. They are an avatar for our own unresolved internal conflicts.
It totally makes me reevaluate my own reactions.
Right. It forces you to look inward. Like, think about a viral star or a politician or a CEO that you absolutely despise or someone you worship.
We build these incredibly elaborate, detailed psychological profiles of people we have literally never even been in the same room with. We are absolutely convinced we know their soul.
But we don't.
No. If Elder is right, we are just standing in front of a mirror, getting furious, or falling in love with our own reflection.
And what happens when a mirror gets too big? What happens when the reflection it forces society to look at is too intense or just too uncomfortably contradictory?
The public decides they want to break the mirror.
Exactly.
They want to control the narrative so they don't have to look at the ugly parts of their own reflection. But the essay argues that the artist didn't just passively stand there and let the world project onto him.
No, he didn't.
He didn't just accept being a blank screen, he pushed back.
But he didn't push back using the weapons the establishment understands. He engaged in what Elder calls a silent confrontation.
Okay, this is where I really need your help to break down the mechanics.
Sure. Let's get into it.
Elder writes that Jackson's art was a silent confrontation with power structures, with the industry, and with the prevailing narratives of society.
Yes.
He touched on marginalized humanity and deep social inequality. But the key distinction the text makes is that his art didn't merely explain the world through discourse.
Right.
His artistic presence exposed the world.
Exposed. That's the key word.
Right. But I struggle with this distinction. Why is showing so much more dangerous to the establishment than telling?
That's a great question.
Because I look at the internet today, and it is fueled entirely by loud, angry speech. We have fiery op-eds, endless political podcasts, Twitter wars. That loud discourse is the accepted currency of rebellion, right?
It is the accepted currency, yes.
So why would a silent artistic confrontation bother the power structures more than a loud, articulate speech?
It cuts to the core of how society manages and neutralizes dissent. Think about the infrastructure of our society. It is incredibly well-equipped, almost perfectly designed to handle discourse. We have built entire multi-billion-dollar industries around it. We have debate stages, cable news panels, comment sections, academic journals.
So it's a game with established rules.
Exactly. It's a game. If you give a fiery speech about inequality, you are playing the game. I can take your speech, I can debate your premises, I can question your statistics, I can attack your logic.
You can just argue back.
Right. I can write a counter article that completely neutralizes your point for my audience.
Yeah.
Discourse is intellectual. It lives entirely in the prefrontal cortex. And because it lives in the mind, it can be manipulated, spun, and debated endlessly until it loses all of its kinetic potency. It becomes just another piece of content.
Okay, I think I get it. So discourse is like submitting a bug report to a massive tech company.
Bug report. Okay, walk me through that.
Like, you find a flaw in the system, you write up a detailed ticket explaining the problem, and you submit it. The company receives it, puts it in a queue, a committee debates its priority, and maybe eventually they address it. It's safe, it's processed.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
That is exactly what discourse is. Now compare that to exposure.
Okay, what is exposure?
Exposure isn't submitting a bug report. Exposure is a hacker walking onto a stage during the CEO's keynote presentation and live crashing the entire server in front of millions of people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you can't debate a system crash.
You absolutely cannot. When an artist embodies the pain, the marginalization, or the fracturing of society, not through statistics, but through their very physical presence, their movement, the raw frequency of their voice, it completely bypasses the intellectual filters.
It goes straight to the gut.
Yes, it bypasses the debate stage entirely. When he stood on a stage and moved in a way that defied the physical constraints of a rigid society, or sang with a pain that resonated in the listener's own chest, he was crashing the system. It forces an immediate, involuntary emotional reckoning.
So it demands a feeling, not a rebuttal.
Yes, you cannot write a counter-argument to a feeling of profound discomfort or overwhelming unexpected empathy that strikes you in the gut. Exposure strips away our intellectual defenses. It makes the world profoundly uncomfortable because it forces the establishment to deal with the reality immediately, rather than safely evading it in a committee.
Exposure is inherently confrontational. It ruins the dinner party.
That's exactly.
And because this kind of undeniable artistic exposure creates so much global friction, because it bypasses the intellect and strikes directly at the collective conscience, the world's natural defensive reaction is panic.
Total panic.
The system tries to regain control, and that leads directly to the brutal, relentless battle over his story that the author details next.
Yeah, the essay doesn't shy away from this at all. Elder openly acknowledges the intense, chaotic disputes over Jackson's legacy.
He addresses the controversy.
Yes, he describes how the narrative has been pulled violently in opposing directions. You have absolute, unquestioning idolatry on one side and deep doubt, severe judgment, and endless controversy on the other. It's a perpetual tug of war.
But in the middle of describing this chaotic tug of war, Elder drops a definitive, incredibly bold claim that just stops the whole debate in its tracks.
What does he say?
He says, narratives change, impact remains.
Narratives change, impact remains.
Right. And he follows it up by pointing out that people discuss legacy as if it were a debate, a court case waiting for a verdict. But Elder writes, legacy does not debate. It happens.
Legacy does not debate. It happens. That might be the most forceful, paradigm-shifting statement in the entire text.
It really challenges our modern arrogance.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we live in an era that completely worships the narrative. We deeply believe that if we just tweet enough, if we publish enough hit pieces, or produce enough multi-part streaming documentaries, we can successfully litigate history.
We think we can control it.
Exactly. We think we can control exactly how a person is remembered by sheer volume of discourse.
But Elder is arguing that true tectonic cultural impact operates on a frequency that is completely immune to human opinion.
Immune to it.
Yes. The impact is a geological event. The narrative is just the weather happening above it. The weather changes every day, but the mountain doesn't move.
That is a brilliant way to put it.
Yeah.
And to really hammer this point home, the author brings in some fascinating historical companions.
He does. He places Jackson alongside some massive names to show what undeniable impact looks like.
First, he brings up Socrates.
Socrates.
Which is wild, right? A pop star and an ancient Greek philosopher. But think about it. Socrates never wrote a single book.
Not one.
He left zero text of his own. All we have are the interpretations of others, like Plato. Yet his legacy, the Socratic method, his way of questioning reality, has crossed centuries and literally forms the bedrock of Western thought.
Then Elder brings in Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee.
A man who tragically didn't even live to see the global, explosive reach of his influence. But Lee didn't just make action movies. He fundamentally altered the philosophy of martial arts and completely rewired how Eastern physical discipline was perceived by the Western cinematic world.
He crossed lines that were supposed to be impenetrable.
And finally, Muhammad Ali.
Ali, wow.
A man who transcended the brutal sport of boxing to become a literal walking language for courage, defiance, and civil resistance on a global scale.
So what is the unifying thread here between Socrates, Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali, and Michael Jackson?
Well, think about how they were viewed in their own time.
They were all deeply polarizing.
Exactly. They were heavily debated. They faced intense, often vicious resistance from the establishments of their eras.
Right.
But their legacies were not built on whether the consensus of the day politely agreed with them. Their legacies were built on the irreversible alteration of the cultural landscape.
It just happened.
Yes, Elder places Jackson in this exact same untouchable layer, and it's crucial to note Elder explicitly states this isn't about declaring the man a perfect human being.
No, perfection is a moral argument.
Exactly. This is about physics. He is in this layer because he was quite simply impossible to ignore.
So we have this massive clash. We have the undeniable, irreversible impact on one side, and the human ego desperately trying to control the narrative on the other.
The ego hates what it can't control.
Exactly. And I think this dynamic explains so much of the toxicity of our modern internet culture.
How so?
Well, why are we so relentlessly obsessed with tearing down, with canceling, with engaging in these endless cyclical debates over public figures?
Right, Elder actually offers a profound psychological diagnosis of this exact phenomenon.
What does he say?
He suggests that the human ego has expanded to its absolute precarious limit. And when the ego reaches its limit, it loses the ability to create. It only seeks to fill the void with noise.
He says, we speak more of noise than of essence. That line from the essay really stung when I read it.
Because it exposes what we are doing. Our modern obsession with debating, dismantling, and psychoanalyzing public figures is in many ways just a coping mechanism.
A coping mechanism.
Yes. It is the ego trying to assert dominance over a force that is fundamentally beyond its grasp. We generate massive clouds of controversy and debate to mask the terrifying realization that true cultural impact is out of our control.
Right. Like you said, we can argue about gravity all day, but things still fall to the ground.
The impact is already baked into the DNA of the culture.
Okay, so if legacy is this undeniable geological force that totally bypasses our intellectual debates, our little Twitter wars, and our think pieces, how exactly does it penetrate our defenses?
That is the crucial question.
Right, because we all build up these massive walls of cynicism and opinion. What is the delivery mechanism that allows this impact to bypass all of that and literally rewire a culture?
Elder points directly to the medium itself.
The music.
The music. And here is where Elder, stepping into his role as a musician, provides a stunning, almost metaphysical breakdown of the medium.
How does he describe it?
He doesn't describe music as just organized sound. He describes it as an active agent. He says music does not need translation, and more importantly, it does not ask for permission. He says it enters.
It enters. Wow, it's like water seeping into a house.
Exactly.
You can lock all the doors, you can board up the windows, you can build a massive intellectual fortress of opinions and biases. But if the flood comes, the water still gets in through the cracks. It enters.
It enters.
But here is the observation that completely broke my brain, and I really want to challenge it, or at least have you explain it to me.
Okay, let's hear it.
The author states that the emotion evoked by the music, whether a listener bursts into tears or feels an overwhelming urge to dance, or sits there and aggressively judges it, that emotion is not actually in the music.
Right.
The music is just a frequency. The emotion is entirely in the person listening. Elder writes, the music only reveals.
It is a radical, highly disruptive reframing of how we interact with art.
Right, because I struggle with this. If I play a slow, descending, minor chord progression on a piano, it is universally recognized as melancholic. We habitually say, that is a sad song.
Yes, we do.
We assign the emotional property directly to the acoustic object. Are we really saying that minor chord doesn't inherently contain sadness? How does Elder justify the idea that the music is completely neutral, just a blank key?
It's a completely valid pushback, but let's look at it through the lens of ethnomusicology.
Okay.
While there are physiological responses to certain acoustic frequencies, the narrative of sadness attached to a minor chord is largely cultural conditioning.
Cultural conditioning.
Yes, Western music trains us to hear a minor key and feel grief. But other musical traditions around the world use what we would call minor scales for celebrations and joyous dances.
Oh, really?
Yes, the frequency itself is objectively neutral. It's just air vibrating at a certain speed.
Okay, I see where you're going.
Elder is proposing an acoustic philosophy where the song acts strictly as a catalyst.
Yeah.
It's merely a key. The key doesn't contain the gold. The key just unlocks the chest.
Wow.
The music enters the listener, completely bypassing their intellectual permission, and it unlocks whatever reservoir of sadness, joy, rhythm, or even deep-seated prejudice the listener is already carrying inside them. The song doesn't give you joy. It locates the joy you already possess and brings it to the surface.
Okay, if we accept this premise that the music only reveals the listener, then we have to completely reconsider everything we just talked about regarding the extreme, polarizing reactions to this specific artist.
We do.
We've established that the reactions were off the charts, right? Absolute idolatry, deep, visceral suspicion, euphoric joy, intense rejection.
The whole spectrum.
If the music, and by extension, the presence of the artist, is just a neutral key, then all of those extreme reactions are not actually data points about Michael Jackson.
Precisely. And this is where the essay's true genius reveals itself. The reactions become high-definition psychological self-portraits of the public.
Okay, so let's play this out. If someone reacts to him with pure, unquestioning idolatry,
Then that person is revealing a deep, unfulfilled internal need for a savior. They are revealing a desperation for an unblemished hero to worship, perhaps to compensate for a feeling of powerlessness in their own life.
so they aren't seeing the artist at all.
No, they are seeing their own need for salvation.
And on the flip side, if someone reacts with immediate visceral suspicion and a burning desire to tear him down,
Then they are revealing a profound internal cynicism. They might be projecting a societal anxiety about the corruption of power, or an obsession with hidden darkness.
this is wild.
The artist acts as the chemical catalyst, but the resulting explosion is entirely composed of the listener's own volatile internal elements.
This flips the entire premise of our deep dive completely on its head.
Completely.
It flips our whole understanding of pop culture. We started out this hour thinking we were analyzing a famous icon. We thought we were putting a historical figure under the microscope.
And suddenly we realized the lens was pointed the wrong way the entire time.
We are the ones under the microscope.
Which leads us perfectly and inevitably to the author's final profound conclusion, the final mirror.
Elder concludes the essay by aggressively stripping away all the noise we've spent the last hour discussing.
All of it.
He sweeps away all the multi-part documentaries, the endless contradictory memories, the millions of think pieces, the court cases, the interpretations. He says all of these are just superficial layers obscuring a single, simple, irreducible physical truth.
Which is.
A human being touched the world irreversibly.
And here is the ultimate realization. The author states that the true legacy is not actually the artist himself. The legacy is the friction he creates in us.
The friction.
Elder writes, the legacy is what he forces the other to confront within themselves.
He says the challenge is not to understand Michael Jackson. The challenge is to understand what inside us reacts to him.
It's a complete paradigm shift.
I have to be honest, as someone who consumes a lot of cultural criticism, that sentence felt like a trap springing shut. He completely shifts the burden of proof.
He really does.
We walked into this text expecting an insightful, perhaps provocative essay about a controversial legendary singer, but Elder tricked us.
We were actually reading an essay about our own fragile egos.
Yes, our own unexamined biases and our own desperate, pathetic need to project our messy internal worlds onto massive external symbols.
It is a masterful, almost surgical philosophical pivot. He takes the ultimate spectacle and turns it into a private introspection.
She's brilliant.
And as he brings the essay to a close, he offers a profound reflection on the nature of truth itself in a polarized world. He writes, "Truth, whatever it may be, loses value when it only serves to separate. And everything that separates too much has ceased to be true."
That is a very heavy, complex assertion. What exactly does he mean by that? How can a truth, if it is factually true, cease to be true just because it causes separation?
If we connect this to the broader reality of our hyperpolarized, extremely fragmented modern world, we see people constantly weaponizing their specific version of the truth.
Oh, definitely.
People use their truth to build massive walls, to create rigid in-groups and out-groups, to declare themselves morally righteous while condemning others as wicked. We use truth as a sword to fracture humanity.
Right, like I'm right, you're wrong, therefore we cannot exist in the same space.
Exactly. But Elder is arguing from a deeply spiritual and philosophical framework. He proposes that if a concept, a narrative, or a crusade is being utilized primarily to foster hatred, to fracture humanity into smaller and smaller hostile tribes, or to perpetuate endless division,
And what?
then it has lost the essential frequency of actual universal truth with a capital T.
Oh, I see.
Genuine truth in this specific philosophical context ultimately connects. It reveals our shared, messy human condition. It exposes our shared flaws, our shared vulnerabilities, and our shared brilliance.
And that shared human condition is rarely neat. It is usually deeply uncomfortable.
Very much so.
Which is exactly why the author ends the entire essay with one incredibly powerful, lingering sentence of reverence.
Applause for who had the courage to touch the untouchable.
To touch the untouchable.
It's vital to understand what the untouchable is in society. The untouchable things are not just the scandalous taboos or the political controversies.
What are they?
The untouchable things are the raw, exposed nerves of the human race. It is our collective, unprocessed grief. It is our hidden capacity for magic and wonder. It is our deepest, most shameful inequalities and our tragic, collective loss of innocence.
Things we spend our entire lives trying to distract ourselves from.
Precisely. To step onto a global stage and willingly become the mirror that reflects all of that raw, unhealed nerve tissue back at an audience of billions.
Knowing full well that the audience might violently hate you for what you forced them to see in themselves.
Yes, that is an act of profound, almost unimaginable courage. Mere contact with those raw nerves invites absolute destruction. The mirror almost always shatters under the pressure.
Wow. So, to synthesize this massive journey we've gone on today, we started by looking at a child trapped inside an emotional and musical precision factory, right? Highly trained for a destiny he was never allowed to choose.
We did.
And we watched that perfectly engineered component break free, causing a cultural implosion that fundamentally displaced the massive entrenched power structures of the global music industry.
We saw how reaching the absolute zenith of human recognition transformed him from a breathing human being into a symbol, a blank green screen, forced to carry the crushing weight of the world's psychological projections.
And we explored how his very existence became a silent, undeniable artistic confrontation that exposed the reality of the world, completely bypassing intellectual debate and causing profound systemic discomfort.
We recognize the futile battle of the human ego, which constantly tries to debate and control legacy, while true tectonic impact simply happens, irreversible and oblivious to our opinions.
And finally, we arrived at the startling realization that the music, the art, and the iconic figure himself were merely a neutral key unlocking the observer. The massive global mirror only ever reflected us.
And so I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into the noise of the world.
Yes, please.
We live in an era that is absolutely obsessed with dissecting, debating, canceling, and destroying the lives of highly visible people. It has become our modern digital blood sport.
It really has.
But what if? The next time you feel an intense visceral reaction to a polarizing public figure.
Or, the next time you find yourself getting furious or aggressively judgmental over the latest viral controversy.
What if you force yourself to stop in that exact moment?
Right.
What if you look at that person on the screen and ask yourself a deeply uncomfortable question?
What is the question?
Ask yourself, what is this mirror actually revealing about my own internal landscape?
Yeah.
What unhealed part of myself, what hidden, terrifying fear or unexpressed, desperate desire am I currently projecting onto this untouchable subject?
Wow. It is a terrifying question to ask. It strips away all of our comfortable outrage.
It does?
But, as Elder's essay so brilliantly shows us, looking past the projection and into our own reflection might be the only way to actually finally see clearly.
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration today. We hope it shifted your gaze, even just a little bit. Keep questioning the obvious, keep looking beyond the veil, and we will see you on the next deep dive.
I know you've been waiting a long time for this. The tracks are made, the songs are ready. Let's take it from the top. This is your story. Honor your past
So you wanna be starting something?
and embrace the future.
Don't stop till you get
That's what people want.
till you get Q, can you lower the lights for me, please?
Okay, but remember, in here, keep those feet still, my man.